Right, we should be live. I'm just going to double check on our page here. Aaron, do you have it up?
I do. I don't see us, though.
Okay, I don't see us yet either. Let me refresh my page real quick. There we are. I see us. Cool beans. So here we are. I have Dave. I don't know how to point. It's like I have Dave, Aaron, and our special guest, Josh, who's going to answer some questions we have on cybersecurity. So if you have questions, pop your questions in the comments and we'll try to get to as many as we can. I do have a list of questions that we have from our customers and other people that have asked me these questions. So we are going to get off with the first question. So the first question is, how do I know my data is safe with banks, insurance agencies, government, healthcare, whatever I do business with? What do I ask to do business with them before I do business with them? And I was thinking about this question myself. I was like, well, you guys, I kind of cheat because I work here. I know who our customers are and I do business with them. But because I know they have our software, but they do business with other vendors that they might share information with too. So there's that to consider. What's your answer?
Yeah, so the good thing about some of the institutions that you mentioned, banking, healthcare, that kind of thing, they're regulated by the state government, the federal government. So there are certain things, certain pieces of security that they're required to have in place. So generally your data is safe with your banks, your credit unions, government agencies, things like that. Always worthwhile to ask some questions. Generally you're okay, but of course, as with anything, nothing is perfect. I think most everybody in the United States at this point has gotten a letter from somebody or another saying, unfortunately, some of your information has been compromised. So it's really best effort, but it's always worth vetting people as much as you can before you start trusting them with your cash and your personal information and stuff like that.
And one thing to remember is, it's easier to steal a car with the keys in it than one that's locked and whatever. So hacking a bank or a government, that's very sophisticated. There's not a lot of people that can do it. Sending an email to someone with a poison link or, tricking someone into giving them your username and password are much easier ways of getting into someone's system. So, it's kind of a numbers game in that aspect.
Cool. That brings me actually I'm going to skip to a different question here because it kind of reminded me years ago, I did get one of those letters and they offered free identity theft protection. And that was one of our questions right here. What are your tips for protecting against identity theft?
Yeah, so as Dave just alluded to, a lot of it is out of your hands. I mean, your data is all over the place. Different vendors all across the country. Really, your best protection is paying attention. Sign up for a free credit monitoring service. Sign up for Credit Karma. Sign up for a lot of times your credit cards will include this as well, and so that way you get an alert right away. Somebody opens an account in your name, you want to know as soon as possible so you can start remediating that and call your bank and make sure that you can take care of that right away. Versus a lot of times what happens is you get compromised, you don't know for 6 months, and they've just been going to town opening accounts, taking out loans in your name, stuff like that, and that's where people really get into trouble.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's fairly inexpensive.
Credit Karma is free.
Right.
And a lot of the credit cards that you can open include that now just with their service. So I think it doesn't hurt to have a couple different eyes on that because it is so important.
Yeah. Good stuff. Do you need to do anything for your home computers?
So the big question there, well, there's a couple things, but the big question there, first of all, in today's environment is, are you working from home? If you're working from home with your machine, you should really be talking to a company like us, or if you have an internal IT department, talk to them about what specific things do you require that I have in place for me to work from home, because you're accessing not only your own personal data, but also company that you work for, the company that you might own, you're accessing that data, it's even more important. So the main things are make sure you're doing your Windows updates regularly is the number one thing. Make sure you have a good antivirus on your computer. Talk to your IT department or us about if you need a VPN or how you should be connecting back to your your work computer, stuff like that are probably the biggest considerations.
Cool. And I'm glad you mentioned antivirus because that's one of the questions. It says, what is the best antivirus?
So there's differing opinions on that, of course. By and large, we say that you want what they call a next-gen antivirus, or it's often called XDR. And so the main thing with that is it's not just relying on a set of definitions. So traditional antivirus, as we've known it for 30 years, has been, okay, antivirus, here's a set of instructions to tell you what to look for. Well, malware is getting trickier and trickier, so you want to make sure that it's a next-gen antivirus that is looking at behavior, not just a specific set of instructions. Because otherwise, all they have to do is change one little line of code, and it's a totally different virus. So by looking at behavior, you can really start to pick apart, okay, we see that this piece of software has accessed 10,000 files in 5 minutes. Something weird's going on here. The one that we use predominantly is called Sentinel-1. And the way we implement it, not only is it a next-gen antivirus, but we have a security operations center. So there's humans actually watching this thing 24/7, 365. So in the event that an attack is launched at 2 a.m. when we're all napping, they're on it and making sure that gets remediated. So that's pretty cool.
That is cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's the world's changed. The viruses are. Maybe I'm wrong, Josh, but viruses are kind of become passe and old school. You're more likely to get malware, and from the simplest malware tricking you thinking you have a virus to paying a small ransom on your home computer, all the way up to, like we've seen, the Keystone Pipeline, the Kaseya hacks. There's a lot of different varieties.
Yeah, the stakes are so much higher now. I mean, I remember in the early 2000s, a virus would do something silly like make your icons run away from your mouse cursor so you couldn't click on anything. I mean, it was kind of funny, kind of unfortunate, but it didn't actually do a ton of damage. Now, a piece of malware can cost millions of dollars of damage. It can cause your business to go down for days or weeks. It can hold all your data for ransom for millions of dollars sometimes. I just saw a stat this morning, ransomware has increased 300% year to year. So it's just so important to keep on top of this stuff. Which
is why I sent blasts out to all our customers and let them know we were doing this, because it's important. It's important. Okay, this is a generic question. What is cybersecurity?
Yeah, so that's a broad question. So, I mean, in a nutshell, cybersecurity is basically what we do to protect our data. What's important to us? It's our banking information, it's our healthcare information, it's everything that we need to keep our businesses running. I mean, Dave just mentioned Colonial Pipeline. That went down, and the whole East Coast couldn't get gas for a week. It's catastrophic. So, in a broad sense, it's what we're doing to protect all of that infrastructure. And primarily that's achieved with a lot of tools like the antivirus we just talked about, firewalls, other monitoring software, things like that. But it's also a lot of policy and a lot of behavior. So making sure that you have good passwords, making sure that you're not sharing accounts, making sure that you're using multi-factor authentication. And in a business environment, making sure that you're doing it across the board, because all it takes is one person. In the case of Colonial Pipeline, it was a couple people sharing the same password for their remote access, and that caused the entire East Coast to not get gas for a week. So there's a lot of policy-driven things and a lot of reviewing those policies and making sure that you're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing in order to keep everything safe.
It's a lot of layers. In one, I want to add, Josh, is education. Our fish training is one of, to me, it's a tremendous bang for your buck, is teaching your employees what not to, what's a fish email looks like.
Yep.
So
yeah, that's a great point about layers, because nothing is perfect. No one product is a silver bullet for this stuff.
Right.
And nobody is 100% protected. It's impossible. But that's why you have layers. So if for some reason virus gets passed, well, let's even step back further. Dave mentioned phishing. So number one thing is employee training. So you want to make sure that people know how to spot this kind of stuff. You want to make sure that your email filtering is working well. You want to make sure your antivirus filtering is working well. So that way, people are having to jump through hurdle after hurdle after hurdle after hurdle in order to compromise your data. And typically what happens is once they get to the third or fourth hurdle, they just go, you know what, forget it. I'm going to find the next guy that's not doing as good of a job, because I can get their information a lot easier, a lot faster, a lot cheaper than I can get yours.
Right.
one of the training things we had was, the analogy was, it's a lot easier to rob someone after they walk out of the bank with their money than to break into the bank and steal the money when the bank has it.
Mm-hmm.
True. So the way you said, nothing is bulletproof. One of the questions was, why are Macs more secure, or more, what was the question? Oh, why are Macs touted to be immune?
They're not. So they are touted that way, and people that are big Apple fans like to say that they're immune. They're not. There are multiple instances of Apple's getting attacked, things like that. The reason they're not attacked as much, or the reason you don't hear about it as much, is because they're not widely adopted as much as Microsoft's infrastructure is. Most businesses use Windows. Most people at home use Windows. So, I mean, if you're an attacker, what are you going to do? If you're developing an attack, you're going to go after what most people use, as opposed to what, I don't know what the number is, maybe 5% of people use. So, in our industry, we refer to that as security through obscurity, but that's not a fail-safe either.
Right. Okay. What kinds of passwords are the most secure? Now, before we got on live, we were talking, and we've covered this topic so many times on our lives. Go to our YouTube channel and find those too, because we talked about this for a whole month, I think. So during password month, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the short answer?
The longer the better, because if you think about it, every character in a password, there's about 80 different things that character could be. So if you have a 1-character password, it only takes about 80 guesses in order to know what that password is. If you have a 2-character password, it's 6,400, and so on and so on and so on. Computers are very fast at being able to do what we call brute force attacks, where they're just guessing every single password possible. So if you think about it, an 8-character password is pretty secure. 12-character password is 4 times, not 4 times, to the power of 4 more secure, and so on. So if you have a 20-character password, you're in pretty good shape. So a lot of times what we recommend is use a phrase or use a sentence instead of just something simple like substitution or password 1 or something like that.
Our favorite is what was it? Jeff 123 123. That was our favorite.
Yes, Jeff. That's a terrible password. So don't use names. Don't use personal information. Try to think of a sentence or a song lyric or something really obscure that can't really be guessed. And then the other thing to pay attention to with passwords is dark web monitoring. You can have the best password in the world, but if it's leaked through no fault of your own, if you use it with a vendor and their password database gets hacked, that password is often for sale on the dark web through no fault of your own. So it's important to monitor for stolen passwords on the dark web. That way you know, hey, attackers have my password in hand. I need to change this thing.
So
You did that, and we did find, my email on there, my old one, right?
Yep.
So I found, whatever sites that were in there. Some of them were obsolete anyway, but we do have a dark web service that we offer.
right, in strongest, most secure, like Josh said earlier, don't share it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
don't
reuse
use it. Huh?
Don't reuse it.
Yeah.
And don't reuse it.
Different password on every site.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, no, that's fine and dandy, but if you're like me, you've got 50 plus then, so how do you constantly keep any of that, managed? That's almost impossible.
Well, you use the right term there, Aaron. Manage. Password manager software. So the recommendation there is use a password manager software such as LastPass or OnePass or something like that. And very important, make sure you have two-factor authentication on that, because otherwise if that password gets out, your whole database is gone. But the cool thing about it is you can install these password managers. What I do is I just randomly generate stupid long randomly generated passwords.
Mhm.
I don't even know what they are.
Yeah.
Me either.
Password manager knows what they are. So I can autofill all my forms and everything else. And then in the event that one of those passwords gets out, I only have one to change. I don't have 50 passwords to change. So
Right.
that's generally the recommendation.
If I were a new business and I had concerns about security, passwords, two-factor, what's the learning curve or the jumping off? Is there a large step there, or is it pretty easy to get it, get that set up?
I think the answer now is different than it was 5 years ago. It seems at this point everybody's at least familiar with what two-factor is, because something that they use requires it. Your bank requires it. Your mortgage loan company requires it. Your healthcare provider requires it when you log into that platform. I think everybody generally knows what it is. People might not like it, but it's a huge thing, because once again, if that password gets out, they don't have your cell phone to be able to get past that second layer. So I feel like the learning curve is not nearly as difficult as it was, because it's just so much more widely adopted now.
Okay.
And by the way, we did do one of our lives. It's on our YouTube channel again, but it was about what to do before you lose your phone and what to do when you lose the phone. Remember that? We did that.
Well.
So
Yeah.
the last question I have on my list, what are the risks with public Wi-Fi, and what should I do when I'm traveling?
Yeah, so ideally, if you can help it, don't use public Wi-Fi. Most people have a lot of data on their phone plans. So generally when I'm traveling, I just fire up my hotspot on my phone and use that, because I know there's nobody else using that thing.
Yeah. Very
But
good.
if you do have to use public Wi-Fi, I generally make sure your firewall is on Windows. A lot of times that thing gets disabled, so make sure that's on, so that way if anybody is poking at your computer, that at least helps. Make sure your Windows updates are done, as I mentioned before. Make sure you have a solid antivirus. But then in addition to that, especially if you're conducting business over public Wi-Fi, make sure you're using your virtual private network, or whatever secure method that your employer has provided you to access the business system. Make sure that all of your websites that you're visiting are HTTPS or they're SSL secured, so that way all of that data is encrypted. So if somebody's sitting in the middle kind of sniffing all that information, they're just seeing junk. They're not seeing all your passwords, all your banking information, all that kind of stuff going back and forth, because you don't know who else is connected to that network. There could be sitting in the airport and there's some malicious actor sitting out in the parking lot or sitting right next to you sniffing all that information.
Cool. What do you think of, this is my question now that you said all that, what do you think of those VPN that you install on your, the apps?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's certainly another good layer, because the nice thing about that then is it's automatically encrypting all of your traffic that you're sending. So even if you are needing to go to a website that's not encrypted, it's still encrypting that information on your PC before it's getting sent out. So that is a good point. Certainly something to keep in mind.
Cool. Well, that's the last of my questions that people sent me, and I don't see any more questions in the chat. So I guess we've made it through. If you have any other questions, guys, feel free to drop your questions or just, send us messages. We'll be glad to answer them. Make sure you get on our newsletter under news@dstech.net, and that way you get all of our articles and you get notified when we're going live, which is every Thursday at 11 a.m. So make it a great day. Thank you so much, Josh.
Yeah,
That was
absolutely.
great.
Happy to be here.
Thank you,
Yep.
Dave. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks,
Have a
Dan.
great day.